welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
This is Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. Our guest today is
Fabian Nicieza.
And you have a lot of really cool things to your name. Would you like to tell some people just some of the things you've worked on, and then we can talk about the book we're going to talk about?
Okay. I have been a professional writer for 35 years now. I sold my first story to Marvel Comics in 1987. I have written pretty much every major and minor character in the Marvel and DC universes over the course of that time, including X-Men, X-Force, being the co-creator of Deadpool, writing Avengers, writing New Warriors, Thunderbolts, Gambit for Marvel, and writing Batman, Superman, Red Robin for DC. I have been a chief creative officer of a kids-themed sports virtual world called Fungo Play. That was for about 4 or 5 years. I have done intellectual property management, franchise content development for major Hollywood studios on lots of big motion pictures. That was all about 10, 15 years ago. I've worked for toy companies doing the same kind of thing.
You've done all the things.
I've done a lot of things. I've tried to keep a very open mind and a curiosity about doing different and new things all the time, because honestly I realized that just being one thing wasn't going to be enough on a given yearly basis to pay the bills, and yeah. Got to pay the mortgage, got to put the kids through college, and now that both of those are done, quite frankly, I'm just having a good time. So I started writing my first novel seriously, for real. Like, this time I'm actually gonna finish it.
Wait a second. When you say seriously, do you mean serious novel, or you were like, no, seriously, I'm going to actually do this thing?
Yeah, seriously, I'm actually going to do this, and I'm going to finish it, as long as I don't think it sucks like as what happened with every single one I tried before that. And I actually would have had a novel done 20 years ago, because I actually had been contracted to do one. I was going to write a novel based on a Marvel X-Men character named Gambit, and I was halfway through, almost 3/4 of the way through the manuscript, when the licensing deal was pulled from the publisher, a publisher named Byron Price Visuals, back in the early aughts. So my book, along with like 5, 6 other books, just died. They never saw the light of day. And that was fine, actually, in hindsight, because I'd rather my first novel not have been based on a comic book character. I think getting to write the book I wrote, Suburban Dicks, really changed the dynamic in terms of the perception of what I could do and how I could be perceived of as a prose writer.
So first of all, Gambit is a great character, and I know everybody wants to know when Gambit is going to become, the star of either his own TV series or movie or book.
I don't know.
But Andie Stern, the main character of the Suburban Dicks series, is delightful, and
thank you.
I am more than happy to forfeit some more Gambit, sorry fellow nerds, to talk more about her and the sequel to Suburban Dicks, The Self-Made Widow. First of all, Suburban Dicks was so much fun.
Thank you.
Everything about the book was it was fun. It was a character who I'd never really read before. I really liked the suburban landscape. It's very similar to where we are here on Long Island.
Yeah.
Yes, Syosset. Are you familiar with Syosset?
I'm familiar with various areas of Long Island, yes, including Syosset. Mostly as drive-through, because I'm from Jersey, so you got to get in and out of Long Island as quickly as you humanly can.
Oh, that's funny. That's what Long Islanders say about Jersey.
Exactly. Yes, I know. One of my best friends lives in Long Island, so that's exactly the kind of relationship we all have with each other.
But yeah, I loved it. So Suburban Dicks, I could not put it down, and then Self-Made Widow, it was just the same. And so The story is it's about Andie Stern, and she's a housewife with a million kids, and she has a history in FBI profiling. She's got a very keen sense of senses, and just like a really good way to sort of suss out what's really going on. And that was really what she wanted to do, but she just keeps having babies with her husband. And when an actual murder is in front of her, not literally, but post tense, she walks onto a crime scene in suburban Dix, that part of her reawakens. And with her and her friend Kenny from high school, who has his own history, they start to solve crimes together. So this is the second one. And
Yes.
in this story, the crime that they're solving is that they believe, Kenny and Andie believe, or Andrea believe, that Molly Good, perfect last name for someone who's a suspected murderer, might have murdered her husband.
Yes, and I wanted a different kind of an approach to the second book. I wanted a different themes to the second book, and I wanted a second book that would question the infallibility of Andie's character, because she is the smartest person in the room. She does see through you, and caustically and angrily can dissect you verbally to pieces. So I wanted a situation where others aren't so sure she's right. And that leads to her starting to question whether she's right, which could, quite frankly, mean that she has found quite a worthy adversary. So I didn't want it to be the same thing as the first book, although the setting is the same and the characters are the same. I just wanted to build and expand on it. As a comic book writer, a lot of that history is taking what you have, taking what has come before, and building on it. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with the Suburban Dix books. I thought it would be interesting to have the themes of the book reflect the new status quo the characters find themselves in. In the first book, they needed to reclaim their identity. In the second book, they both have done that, and here we are 11 months later, and both are asking, is that enough? And that reflects the themes of our suburban existence to me, where any even slightly intelligent person has to stop for a moment, look at the banality of our routines, the constant Groundhog Day of the things we need to do on a weekly basis out here in the suburbs. Like I just mentioned earlier, grocery shopping this afternoon. Normally I do that Monday mornings, but I couldn't because I had a couple calls I was going to be on. So I am doing it this afternoon. The recycling, is that this Thursday or is that next Thursday? I forgot. All of that stuff starts to just become very, very stultifying. So I wanted the characters to ask, is this all there is to my life? Especially after both of them have kind of reclaimed an internal and an external awareness of who they are. She is an investigator. She is a crime solver. It's how she best is able to manifest her strongest traits. He is an agitator and a provocateur who's basically a bullet that's shot in a good direction or at a good target when it's in search of the truth rather than in search of his own self-aggrandizement. So Andie and Kenny are different sides of kind of the same coin. And yes, she is absolutely the lead character in my books, but I think that his role really helps kind of cast different perspectives on each of their personalities.
So the first book, she's walking around pregnant, very heavily
Yes,
so.
very heavily so.
Very, very heavily so.
Very heavily so. It was actually based on the pregnancy of a friend of mine 30 years ago, 30 years ago, unfortunately now. So there was an image in my mind of Andrea that I wrote in the first book, that she looked like an egg yolk slipping out of the car. And that kind of happened in real life. And I don't name names because I wouldn't want my friends to get angry at me. But the women are pregnant in different ways. It's just a reality, and it's very hard for a man to talk about it, but it is a reality. So I wanted a character that really bore a physical burden for being pregnant. internally as well as externally. So I probably overwrote that in my first book. Luckily, I didn't have to deal with that this time.
Did
So
you wait a second? So now I want to know, and as somebody who's been pregnant, I don't know why this didn't cross my mind. Did you talk to some women, including your friends, just about just how, like, that whole experience?
I am 60 years old writing about 30-year-old characters, but you have to understand I came up with the characters when I was 30 years old. The first book idea I've had since 1995, and it was of my time and place. It was all of me and my friends groups, my peers, getting married, getting our first condos or townhouses or houses, getting pregnant, having our first kids, starting when do we have our second kids, et cetera, et cetera. That was all part and parcel of the time period in which I created these characters. I wrote them as a 50-year-old man from start to finish, but I originally conceived of them as a 32, 33-year-old, right? So it was born of a constant immersion in conversations with my wife and our friends about the things they were going through. I I am a perpetually caustic existence, my presence is, but I also try quietly on my inside to absorb what I can about what people say, how people think, how people say things that are contrary to the things they must be thinking. Like, so I try to pay attention to all of that in my writing and infuse it into the characters themselves.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
every character in Suburban Dicks and in The Self-Made Widow, to one extent or another, is based on aspects of human interactions I have had in my life with people, and cherry picking what works for building a character, what trait of a friend of mine, or even an enemy of mine, what trait works well for this person, and trying to craft it around that.
So this book is really cool because while Andie's children were more sidelined in the first book, and they were not really, they were almost like, things that she had to work around.
Yes.
Her oldest daughter, Ruth, kind of is sort of hinting that she might be more similar to her mother than we previously knew.
Well, Ruth is getting older. In the first book, she was just starting fifth grade, and now in the second book, she's starting sixth grade. So that's middle school. That's a new school. That's a different time period in a kid's life. And she's turning 12, and puberty is coming full steam ahead. And middle school is a real challenge for parents who have daughters. And not so much, I think, for parents who have sons, because they tend to be pretty dopey about life at that age. But Ruth is starting to understand the parameters of what her mother does and how it could affect other people. And I liked exploring that in her, because I like her as a character tremendously. I also know where I want her to go as a person over the ensuing years. If I get to do more Suburban Dicks mysteries, which is up in the air right now, but if I get to do more of them, there are things you'll read in The Self-Made Widow, which 5 years from now you'll go, oh, Sarah, that I see now, I get it, because I know who these kids are, I know who these adults are, and I know where I want them to go. That doesn't mean that it's all set in stone, but it's like, I'm going to drive from New York to Los Angeles. That doesn't mean I can't take a detour to see the biggest ball of twine in Iowa, So I give myself the luxury of being able to go off-road and see that big ball of twine if a certain character investigation takes me there. But if you asked me under sodium pentothal, I could tell you where these characters are going to be in 10 years, because they've been kind of percolating in my brain for 25 years.
And just kind of getting back to the fact that she was like fully pregnant in the last book. Now, what I love is she has another baby. The first book, the baby pees on the crime scene, which is actually literally the opening scene of Suburban Dicks. Now she has a new baby, which is the one that was who she was pregnant with, and she's walking onto a crime scene with the baby on her hip, and she's so much fun to read. She's just a really interesting character. I don't know, and I think this is explored in this book, that she'd be somebody that you could easily be friends with, and I know she's aware of this very much. And Kenny kind of is aware of that about himself, Kenny Lee. But I really just enjoy reading her, and just sort of getting back to what you were just saying. I'd like to see more of these books. I would love to see this as like a TV series. It's just so great, and the whole idea of just how the suburbs are changing. The first book was a lot about how the suburbs are changing diversely, racially, and how that is sort of tied into the past, and how it was looked at in the past and how it is now. This one, what I thought was interesting was that it was about the people, about like the people who are your typical suburban white moms, and those issues, and how perfect doesn't really exist.
Yes, and I mean the second book's themes are strongly focused on marriage and companionship and friendship in suburbia, and all the good things about that and all the bad things about that can exist, all the complications that create themselves when friends know secrets about other friends, and all the difficulties that can pose in marriages as well, when spouses are keeping things from each other. I like setting it in suburbia. It's because I know it so well. I live it every day. I've lived in the area I write about for 30 years, and I've lived in New Jersey since 1968. I'm an old man now, getting older every minute, and I like having the opportunity to just reflect on what I have experienced and how I perceive things, and all of it is with a sense of cynical optimism to it. But I want every book to bring the character to a new place. There is a bit of a status quo shift for both Andie and Kenny in The Self-Made Widow. And if there are further books in the future, there'll be status quo shifts for them moving forward as well. I like life to include change in it, even if it's a series. I prefer reading series of books where things have really grown and changed and are different in the 6th or 8th or 10th book of a series than they are in the 1st or 2nd book. Conversely, I don't like books where the 20th book of the series is the same exact thing as the 2nd book of the series. The characters are in the same exact place. I'm lucky that if I were to write books like that and I was 35 years old, I might prefer to do it that way. But I'm 60 years old now. I only have a certain amount of books in me anyway before I die. So I might as well die happy by writing what I want to know and just moving the characters forward.
So that said, if there is a next Suburban Dicks book, is there going to be a crime at like Ruth's bat mitzvah? What are
no,
you
although
looking at?
it's funny you say that. If there's a next Suburban Dicks book, which I know what the story is, I know what the themes are. She does play, not in the 3rd book, but in the 4th book, she would play an incredibly vital role in the story, because if there's a 4th book, it's really the investigation of a pair of teen suicides. And by the 4th book, she's a freshman in high school. So she's actively and intimately involved in the actual investigation because one of the girls who committed suicide was someone she knew. Possibly even someone we've met already in the book. And the 3rd book really is about, if there's a 3rd book, I have to caveat that. I wish there is, so you tell Putnam you want a 3rd book.
Putnam, I want a 3rd book, and I want this to be optioned for
the option already happened, Jessica. The option, it's been in development for a little over a year now. It's not in production though. So in production means that it's cast and they're starting to plan to shoot and everything else. In development means they're still haggling and percolating over what they want to do with it. So I try to divorce myself a little from that because I have very little control over it. And the only control I would get is if I get the rights back, then I have control again. So for now, they're going to do what they're going to do. We'll see how it is. The third book is really about parenthood and parenting. And it really is, if I looked at Andrea's journey as a bit of a trilogy to get her to where she wants to be, the third book is part 3 of that trilogy. And by the end of the third book, she really is at a better place for herself and moving forward what she wants to do, because the third book's mystery would be solving the murder of her brother when she was 8 years old, and it never was solved. And her brother Isaac was 11 and she was 8, and he died right in front of her. And
her parents blamed her for it.
Yeah, her parents blamed her for it because of the urchin gang she was running around in. So the third book would really be an exploration of present day parenting on the part of all the characters and how that's affecting the children, combined with her wanting to solve the murder of Isaac, which forces her to confront a lot of things about herself as well. And that would be the third book. But in the meantime, I need all of you to read the second book.
Please read this book. I cannot.
If you don't read The Self-Made Widow.
Not only that, but I'm going to tell you something. This book and the Suburban Dicks, I'm about to do a title swap this afternoon at work, and I'm going to recommend to everybody there that they read it because it is so good. So
I appreciate that very much.
Series. Yes.
If you don't read The Self-Made Widow, there may not be a third book. So you got to read The Self-Made Widow first. Then I'll get you all the good stuff about Andrea solving the murder of her brother when she was 8 years old. But the books have been very well received, both critically and more importantly to me by readers. Its ratings on Goodreads is consistently really strong and positive. The 1-star reviews I've gotten have almost been exclusively by very fragile white people. So that's okay with me too. I don't mind when a fragile white person gets mad at me for seeing too much of themselves in the material. So that's okay. And the 1-star reviews have been really, really few in comparison to the reader response that it's gotten. So I'm very pleased with that because I'm a writer that's in my career been relatively reviewer ignored. Not bad, not good. He's just there, but the readers are the ones who have read and enjoyed the material in order to keep reading and enjoying material that I do. So getting good reviews on the first book from the professional publications was a surprise to a certain extent, but really kind of thrilling in a way because it's never really happened to me in my career. Getting nominated for an Edgar and nominated for a Seamus Award is not the kind of stuff that I'm used to, but I'll take it. It was fun, and I think that readers who enjoyed Suburban Dicks are going to enjoy The Self-Made Widow. I also think readers who didn't read Suburban Dicks can read The Self-Made Widow as a self-contained introduction to the story world that Andie and Kenny exist in.
Thank you so much. Like I said a million times, please read this book. Read all of the books. They are so good.
Listen to Jessica, everyone. She knows what she's talking about.
I think I do.
Thank you. If you're recommending they read the books, then I agree. Yes, you are right.
Once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. Our guest was
Fabian Nicieza.
And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.